Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pete Murray. I'm the marketing manager at Firaxis Games. This is FAQ with Firaxis. We get asked a lot of questions as a studio, and hopefully in the course of today, you guys have had a chance to have a bunch of them answered. We've collected ones that we get asked a lot that we can kind of group together. We've developed this list in conjunction with our partners at Wikia. We thought we'd have two senior guys, one from each team, to answer them. So to my left right here is Garth DeAngelis. He's the senior producer of the XCOM Enemy Unknown series.
Hello.
And next to him is Dennis Shirk, who is the senior producer on Sid Meier's Civilization 5.
Hello.
So thank you for coming out, and we will go ahead and jump right into your questions. And the first one is, how do you decide what gets patched or updated in your games?
Oh wow, we're going straight for the jugular.
Right for the throat.
Yes. You want me to start with this one?
It's up to you.
Well, I wouldn't say there is a science at Firaxis with respect to that. Clearly, bugs, issues, things reported by the community drive that a lot. Things that are feasible to fix in a reasonable time frame. Design always has some things that they want to do, some top priority items after our key dates that they know they want to get to, and we plan for that and dedicate resources to it. But it's really a mix of design leadership and what's reported by QA, along with stuff from you guys in the community. We're always looking at the forums. We are aware of things that you guys want. And I know we can't always get to every single thing, but we do read those ad nauseum and try to get to them when we can.
Dennis?
I sometimes picture it like a Rocky montage when he's getting ready for a fight. Because you just finalized your game, it's all ready to release, and you know as soon as you release, as much testing as you can possibly do, something is going to go wrong. So everybody's geared up, we've got these enormous lists of phone numbers, and everybody's watching the forums, because that's the quickest way to find out if something does go wrong. And one of the biggest things, I don't know how many Civilization 5 players are here from back in the days when we first released Civilization 5 Vanilla. The game didn't work in the entire country of Spain. And it was the strangest thing. We couldn't figure it out at all. It went on for like a week and a half, 2 weeks, and it came down to this one small localization issue where sometimes Spanish names with special characters, if it was a username on your computer, would cause the documents directory to not get created, and the whole game would have just dumped. And it was only happening with the Spanish language. But it took us a few weeks to get it figured out, but it wasn't just figured out within our offices. We figured it out because we have awesome fans that actually walked us through the process, and we were able to isolate exactly what it was. And that's a lot of what comes into play for a game like Civ. We obviously have goals for the designers that they really want to do when we have balance patches and things like that come up. But our fans are really awesome at finding any exploit that we might not have found. They're going to find it within a week, and we'll know what that is. And that's what's so great about our communities, because they're really good at finding that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
All right, our next question is, can you give us some background on how you broke into the industry? And this is usually followed up by, what are some tips for breaking into the game industry? You both came in from different paths, actually.
Yes, we did.
Very different paths.
Want ping pong?
Yeah, sure. I worked in the advertising agency, the interactive advertising agency, doing e-commerce stuff. I was a generalist in general, doing a lot of art. I led up some teams doing that kind of stuff. My real goal was to get to E3. I had to find a way to get to E3. At the time, that was the only game show, that was it, and you had to have press credentials or some sort of content credentials to get into E3. And so I made this website called Trade Games Now. It was just a trading site where people could meet up and trade video games, and then I put a content section in there and started writing these totally amateur reviews of video games with the sole purpose of getting press credentials so I could get to E3. It was really bizarre, and I went about it a really wrong way. It was a lot of work. But the strange thing is that was actually what helped out with getting my job at Firaxis. Because Firaxis, I saw a job listing for a marketing position that also needed somebody to run the intranet, and that kind of fit. And I had this site, and it all worked out, and I got hired by Firaxis really through the side door, and went from there. I was in the marketing department for a while. I became the marketing manager, and eventually I made the hop over to production, and then to Civilization 5 eventually, senior producer of the Civilization team. And it was just one of those awesome things where if you really want to get into the industry, it doesn't always have to be a straight brute force approach of getting your specific programming degree in college, going to school for 3D modeling, which are also extremely important. But finding any way that you can to get into a position, get your foot through the door is always great. We've got a lot of positions, even in quality assurance at our company, that's gateways to other positions in our company, because talent comes from everywhere. So just keep your eyes open and your ears to the ground.
I never knew that story, Dennis.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It is so cool to hear a bunch of different people's backgrounds and how they got, even within our studio at Firaxis, how they got into the industry. For me, somewhat similar to Dennis, I was in a completely different industry, the financial industry. I worked for Bank of America, big evil bank. I know. What was I doing over there? Not quite sure, but that's where I landed after undergrad. And I actually did quite a bit there. I ended up being a VP at that bank, but I realized this is not what I want to do with my life. It was a little too vanilla, a little too black and white. I always loved video games. That was the one constant in my life. I did a lot of different things that I dabbled in, but video games since I was a kid, Commodore 64, I always loved. And I read a book called A Whole New Mind by Daniel Pink, which was all about how America is going to be dominated by right-brainers in the future, where the thing that's going to differentiate us as a country is going to be the creative. Things that you can't outsource, things that you can't automate, it's going to be the creative. And I got really inspired by that book. Learned about Carnegie Mellon University's Entertainment Technology Center from that book, and decided to quit my job at the bank and go back to grad school for an entertainment technology degree. And somehow I got in there. At the ETC, I made a prototype game with a group of 5 other students.
It's an amazing prototype.
Yeah.
And that thank you very much. I wasn't going to say all that, but that actually is what got me noticed by Firaxis, because that prototype was in the Independent Games Festival, which would be a piece of advice I would give any aspiring developer out there. Look for those sorts of opportunities for big, visible festivals, whether it's Indiecade or IGF. It got accepted into that. And then I had an opportunity to interview as an intern for my last semester with Firaxis. Started there as an associate producer, but I also taught myself level design skills through Unreal while I was there. Started making levels there in my free time, in addition to the associate producer skills. And had an opportunity to move into the lead producer role about a year after working as a level designer, associate producer hybrid at Firaxis. And then I was lucky enough to work with these guys on Enemy Unknown. So that's sort of my story.
I got my job because Dennis got promoted to producer. What kind of software development methods do you use? Scrum, Kanban, BDUF? How do you arrive at the selected method, and how has it worked for you? Do all teams use the same method? I think this is interesting because I think both teams have kind of different tracks for how they do their development. So,
You guys never thought you'd be hearing production processes in this.
Controlled
two
chaos,
producers.
Yeah.
I would say.
yeah.
We've the Civ team is a split personality when it comes to what they want to use. From production, we actually let the leads decide if they want to use Scrum or Agile or Waterfall, things like that. And so we've actually got a split down the middle. We've got a hybrid that the art team or that the engineering team uses, and the art team is hardcore Waterfall, just how they're used to working in Civ. Civ is not so much, I don't want to say iterative, but when you're talking about something like XCOM, when you have individual level designs and you've got a whole process you have to get through to get something beautiful out of the other side, Civ is a game of assets, lots and lots and lots of assets. So in that regard, Waterfall works better for artists because they know what they have to make, and you're going down the line at that point. So when you're entering production, they have a very diehard view on what has to get done on the other side. The engineering team on the other side uses more of a Scrum approach, but it's not pure Scrum. They actually slimmed it down quite a bit. But they really like the approach of the stand up every day, keep it nice and quick. You know what everybody else is working on. So I think it really depends on the development team and what's going to work for that given development team. I know a lot of studios out there are really diehard Scrum Agile. But we've been fortunate at Firaxis that the management team just says whatever's going to work best for your team is what we should go with.
Right. We do a very, very similar methodology to exactly what Dennis just said. I'm a huge believer in that there's no silver bullet in an industry with such uncertainty and creativity and innovation. So to try to apply a pure hardcore production methodology, I think can actually be a detriment to something that needs to have a little more breathing room. With that said, we have the subgroups tell production what would support their job, what would make their lives easier. And if that does mean hardcore Scrum, we do it. If not, we leave it a little more open-ended as long as they are hitting their goals in a given milestone.
Okay. Our next question is, how do you balance the restrictive needs of timelines and resource limitations with the desire to allow for creativity and unexpected happy surprises during the development process? This is the old, how do you keep your designers in check?
No.
That's
What
I wish I could say that. No. This is one of my most challenging questions because
You have Jake.
Well, dang, I wasn't going to go there, but no. Obviously, the designers at Firaxis are extremely brilliant with respect to the creativity they inject in the projects you guys love. With that, there can be a lot of change that comes over the course of the weeks and months when you use a project where you're not finding the fun, or we have to change major systems. And again, that's part of that uncertainty. Then, so that really fights a producer's pure job of reporting certainty and saying when we're going to get things done. We really simplify it on Enemy Unknown. We simplified things where we said, what's the feature set Jake wants to do? Here's the amount of time that we have over the course of the production cycle where we have to have the answers to these specific questions. And that just helped focus things a little bit. Doesn't mean that there still wasn't change within there, but we created these goalposts with acceptance criteria to help the designers find what they want to find. Again, it's not a science, but it's my job to try to provide them the direction for the high-level roadmap, because we always have to keep the time in mind, or else you guys will never get the games you love in your hands. They're artists. That will keep working and making things better.
Well, the one fun thing I found out about Sid and the way that he designs, it's only done when he says it's done. And that means you could be in the middle of beta, you think everything's locked down, and he's going to do a check-in because it makes the game better. And production has to scramble and try to plug all the holes, but ultimately that's what drives the games at Firaxis. So if Ed Beach on my hand or Jake with Garth, if something's going to make the game better, they're going to pull the trigger, and then we panic a little bit and then figure out how we actually manage to get it done. But that's really important. That iterative process doesn't stop just because we hit alpha or beta. It keeps going, and as you know, with our patching process, et cetera, 2K allows us to do what we need to do in terms of ongoing balance. If we find a way that the players are finding an optimal way through the game, optimal ways through the game are no good for us. So we're going to rebalance it again so that there's multiple paths. We're just never going to be satisfied with the game when we put out the door. It's never just going to get put on a shelf and set off to the side. I think that's what really means games that stand the test of time to us, because they're never quite done, because when they are done and we have to put it to the side, that means fans are eventually going to be done with it too. So it's always going to be ongoing and playable and awesome.
But to the credit of the designers on the XCOM project as well, along with the expansion, Jake learned a lot. There was very public postmortems that we talked about where we were doing design in post-production, like Dennis was talking about. And then on the expansion with Enemy Within, Ananda Gupta, who designed that, he has a very, very different style than Jake, and he was actually more, he embraced more production methodology as well. So it also depends on the personality of your designer and understanding what that is as a producer, so you can support them in the best possible way.
Okay. What's your favorite Easter egg in any Firaxis title? Garth, you're in one of our games.
So remember that bank story I told you guys about? One of our environment modelers surprised me on the expansion, where all of a sudden I'm play testing the game, and one of the maps I see my big fat face on the wall in the bank map. I'm a portrait of one of the evil bankers that they put in there. So when you play through Enemy Within, you can take a look at that. That was one of my favorite surprises.
I guess my favorite isn't quite as dramatic, but it was left in definitely from the development team. And I think it was only fairly recently that somebody actually noticed it, just because of the way the Wonder images are cut off. But Dorian Newcomer, the art lead on Civilization 5, thought it'd be hilarious if on the Sydney Opera House, they had the little boat with the guys from the I'm on a Boat video that SNL did down in the bottom corner of the image. And it went for a really long time before somebody actually noticed it was down there and recognized what it was.
It is T-Pain.
Yeah.
Is there anything interesting that had to be cut from your games?
Cuts. That's tough. The thing with the Civilization game is once we really start rolling into production, design really has a good idea of what they're doing, because Ed really prototypes everything well ahead of time. And if something new comes up, we approach it, but it's rare that something gets cut. The one area that I think is was fun for us is when you deal with international age ratings, because an age rating will come back, and it's usually late in the process where you get surprised when something is just not acceptable, or you get an age rating that's too old for the game you're making. And one of the ones that stood out for me is during Gods and Kings development, Civilization V Gods and Kings, the expansion pack. And the intro movie, we were going through, I don't know how many of you remember the intro movie, but we were going through the whole progress of time and how people were using religion at this point in time for bad things like burning witches. And we had a shot in there that was modeled out and was in an early cut of the movie that went to the age rating, where it had this witch's feet, and they set the things on fire, and the feet start wiggling and everything. And in hindsight, it was really horrible, and it should have never been the case where we had somebody like being burned at a stake. And we actually had to go back to the drawing board to redo that whole cut, that whole piece, because it was apparently, it blew our age rating right out of the door.
Rated T for teen.
One of the items from Enemy Unknown, which was a fairly moderate system on the tactical layer, and this was talked about before. I don't know if you guys saw any pictures of the Reaper beast alien from Enemy Unknown. It was about a 2 to 3 story tall alien with this massive transparent, semi-transparent belly that could consume your soldiers with its tongue and put it in its belly. And then you had to save the soldier before it was digested and turned into human goo. It's actually, the idea of large-scale aliens is something the team really loved. It just was a massive undertaking to pull off. But that's something that the team always talks about and reflects back on as a subsystem that we would have loved to see get in there.
We had that same unit in Civ 5.
Oh yeah? How'd you pull it off?
They're really small.
Oh, okay.
Are you hiring? Yes. In fact, if you go to the Firaxis Games website, www.firaxis.com, we have a link to a jobs section, and that is updated off 2K's master hiring list. Currently, we have some engineer positions posted. We have some artist positions posted as well. Yes.
There's a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Go look at the list if you're interested. We need people.
If you're an OpenGL programmer, come up right afterwards. Is Beyond Earth meant to be Civ 6? Dennis, this is a question for you.
No.
What are your opinions on designing storytelling to be heavily emergent versus heavily crafted? XCOM is a mixture of these two things. Why go that route? What are your personal preferences? And where do you see the greatest potential for innovation going forward? Garth, since this is an XCOM question,
that's a great question.
Pick part of it.
Again, with the Enemy Unknown release, we talked about this a lot, and I am a huge fan of emergent storytelling. I think it's part of Firaxis' DNA, and XCOM was a unique derivative off of Civ, which is super macro. Well, we still had the macro strategy layer, but we also had a little bit of the boots on the ground portion of the game with tactical, with your individual soldiers. But yeah, we had sort of the handcrafted storyline with Dr. Valen and so forth, and the specific things you had to do to save the world. But what we were more excited about design-wise were the stories that we were hearing from the fans about their individual soldiers that they created, how they died, how they saved each other, and how their playthroughs changed from those stories that you guys came up with on your own. Personally, I believe that is a huge area of opportunity for design overall in the game industry, and I hope we continue to push that.
All right. This is a tough one. Is it harder to create a new IP or update existing franchises? Let's start with XCOM. Do you want to consider that an IP update or a new IP?
I mean, production-wise, that was a new IP. Technically, it is an update to an existing franchise, but all the tech that had to be built from the ground up, we treated this as we had to run and build a new IP from, obviously, the 1994 version. And I think on the surface, a new IP has more challenges. You have a lot more questions you need to answer with respect to the design, with respect to the systems that have to be built. Whereas on a sequel, you want to build off that. I think Sid has his rule of 33, 33, 33 for a sequel, which makes things a little bit more manageable. And if you haven't heard of that rule, it's I believe it's 30% reuse from, like, if you take Civ 4 to 5, for instance, right? Maybe you want to talk about that, but that just that rule of thumb, the 33% reuse, 33% of brand new content, and then I think 33% is the same, right?
Yes.
Right. That right there, when you try to then organize a schedule production-wise, knowing that you have 33% the same, that's really helpful.
But there is a trap there in terms of making a new IP for a completely new title, and you experience this with XCOM, to make something that people do not have existing expectations with and still works all the way around can be difficult, but creating a update to an existing franchise can be also very difficult, especially when you have an existing audience that has high expectations for what's coming next.
Yep.
And we experienced some of that when we went from Civ 4. You had this packed full Civ 4, Beyond the Sword, amazing levels of gameplay. And then John, the lead designer on John Schaefer, lead designer on Civilization 5, redid the whole thing because he really wanted to go to hexes, to 1 year of a title. It was a huge change. And one thing that he didn't want to do going forward is bring in forward all those systems, because we're already introducing a lot of new big features to the player base. But we caught a lot of flack for that. A lot of our existing fans thought that all of that stuff should have been there. There's a lot of things that they've grown used to that were not there, even with the big changes. So it can be a trap in and of itself when you're doing another version of the game, to make sure that you're really putting enough in there that the expectations are going to be met for everybody that's played the previous iteration.
Yeah.
They're going to play this new iteration, and it's going to be new all over again while still being familiar at the same time. That's a really difficult tightrope to walk.
That's right. There's a very small window between this is the same stuff that you guys loved and we have that, versus, well, it's too much of the same as well. So that balance is a totally different challenge than a new IP.
Yeah.
Production-wise, that's more of a creative challenge, I think.
Okay. Well, that's the bulk of the questions that we've gotten from you guys submitted through the internet. A lot of these reflect sentiments that we've heard from people submitted to Firaxis over the years. We hope that this has given you some insight into how we go about designing our games, making the choices that we do here. Appreciate you coming out this afternoon. We'll be around for a little bit afterwards if you want to come up and say hi, or come up with the other frequently asked questions. I'll be happy to talk to you. Thanks for coming out. Enjoy the rest of Firaxicon. Ed Beach will be up next talking about how he designed the leaders for Brave New World. So stay tuned for that.
That's an awesome talk. So if you get a chance to revisit that, the whole process of selecting leaders and civs is really cool. So.
Okay. Thanks for coming.
Thank you all.
Thanks.